that we've got Kunle here from, he's the Director for Voice for Change. I'm absolutely delighted he's able to join us from national level. That's the one benefit we've got from what's happened in terms of online meetings, that we can now connect with each other, whether it's nationally or internationally, which is a very good thing. I know that Kunle has to leave very promptly today because there's so much going on and everybody's kind of in different meetings. So I'm going to ask him to come in because I really want the first half hour of when Kunle is with us to really be devoted to this agenda of what's been happening around us, and ask him to give us a few reflections, first of all, about Black Lives Matters and all of that that's been happening, and then tell us about the issues around the impact of COVID on BAME communities. Welcome, Kunle.
It helps if you unmute. Yeah. Good morning, everybody. Wow, what's the time that we're actually living through? The circumstances of George Floyd's death. It's interesting. 2 weeks ago, I think it was either the day after or on the actual night of his death. I was watching Newsnight and then switched to Question Time. And I waited for some discussion about George Floyd. And they went through the whole program and it wasn't even mentioned. A week later, of course, the whole of both America and international society were focused on this single incident. The absolutely horrific video had gone around the world via social media, and one of the kind of features of the 21st century is that when we talk about racism and racist incidents, it's no longer third or fourth hand textual information. We're now able to see these incidents graphically, up close and personal. And I think that for me, the protests, the demonstrations have acted as a catalyst and a reminder of what we face, but also more so how we actually talk about race in the here and now. I'm not one of those people who thinks that racism has just remained the same as it always has been. You know, I can remember what Manchester was like in the 1980s. I actually, you know, in a former life used to be a DJ and worked at places like Owen Park. I knew the Hacienda very well. Worked with people like Mark Radcliffe. And so Manchester was like my favorite city outside of London. But I also remember the Manchester Martyrs. I also remember the marches of the BNP. And I remember once, in fact, going to a meeting in Manchester, trying to get to my meeting. There was a blockage on Oxford Road, and I got out and found myself face to face with a BNP march and myself in the middle of it. Being stupid and being from London, I made the assumption that nobody would dare touch me. And I boldly walked through the center of the demonstration. And to my relief, nobody did. But I think the most important aspect of this for me has been the rallying cry of our young people. They have not gone through the experiences that I have or that many people of my age have. And so we slightly look at the question of racism through a different prism. And I think the great thing for me is seeing them actually motivated to want to actually get up and do something. The weaknesses for me are that there seems to be a lazy assumption on the part of the media that everything is connected with what happens in America. Indeed, we have our own deaths here in the UK, which I suppose might actually be an important point of discussion today, which is why actually we do not get the same reaction from our own people when such incidents occur to our own Black, brown, British citizens. And that for me does trouble me in terms of understanding then what this moment truly represents. I think certainly there is a challenge in relation to pushing racism out of our lives, but at the same time, I'm not one to the view that an assumption that every Black person is faced with a life of victimization and that every white person is inherently racist. I just don't subscribe to that view. And I think that we have to be really careful also with our young people in terms of where and how we're leading them. Now, back in my day, we had some fantastic leaders who enabled us to debate these issues. One of the things that's been on my mind is, well, where are our leaders today? Where are the Bernie Grants? Where are the Russell Prophets? Now, where are the critical thinkers at this moment? And I think there's a gap there. I woke up this morning with an email from the Mayor of London asking me to join a commission on monuments and statues. In the wake, obviously, of what happened in Bristol with the statue of Colston, again, which has been shown very graphically on the news and in social media. And I think the question of what monuments mean and the symbolism that they contain is an interesting area of debate. But again, I'm not sure if what we need is a movement focused on symbols, or what we used to kind of consider that anti-racism was rooted in political change, and that anti-racism was about not just the liberation of Black people, but the liberation of society from discrimination and from one of the central issues that held it back in terms of development. So I think it's been an interesting weekend and a week, but I think there's a lot more to be said, but I'm not sure if we've got the right people saying it. I'm not sure if we're providing the right questions yet. The media has now gone into overdrive in trying to look at the question of race, and has very much talked about this being maybe the possibility of a new moment. But I'm not sure. I'd be interested to hear what people have to think. Is anti-racism simply about individual changes of behavior, or are we really talking today about a much broader, wide-ranging political shift of the type that I think many of us aspired to in my youth? But I'm not going to say anymore. I'm actually going to be on several discussions over the next week or so. But I'm much more interested in what people have to say here. So just very quickly, in terms of COVID, which has also been mixed in with this, we're expecting a whole series of announcements from the government on the 10th of June. One important announcement may be that there is some relaxation around the furloughing of employees and enabling them to actually go back and work with their companies, institutions on a part-time basis. So watch out for that. Last night was the deadline for the comic relief bid for a strategic partner to deliver funding to BAME communities across the country. That pot of 650,000 approximately has been swelled by an additional pot from the National Emergency Trust of 2.5 million. I don't know why that's not been announced yet, but I know for a fact that has happened. And Voice for Change has bid And as Atia knows, our strategy is to acquire a significant part of resources and to lobby to make that pot available to the regions on a delegated basis, so that regions will actually get control over the distribution and allocation of their own funding. I'm meeting with National Community Lottery Fund's the chief executive this afternoon at 2 o'clock, and I've sent a proposal to her, and I believe that similarly, UBELE will have some of the notes of the work that I've been working on with Naz from the Lancashire BME network to make that happen. So fingers crossed. We had a break over the weekend with the Indigo Trust, an offshoot of the Sainsbury's Trust, backing our bid. So we'll keep our fingers crossed and hope that something comes of that, and we can make those resources available to people like yourselves in Greater Manchester. I'll leave it there.
Great, thank you very much, Kunle. Have you got time up till about 10:30, Kunle?
I've told the other group that I might be late, so
okay.
I might be able to squeeze an extra 10 minutes in.
Okay, so I'm going to just see if anybody wants to ask something, but you're going to have to put your hands up or use the use the hands up sign so I can pick it up and I can bring people in for things. I'll just say this to you, that Voice for Change and other umbrella organizations at a national level have been working at a significant pace over this period and have given us, we've had the opportunity at a regional level to actually join that and step up really, and be part of that collaborative voice and put all our efforts in there. And certainly from a GM BAME point of view, that's been kind of my role in my work and my understanding. I think that that's what we should all be doing, is working together. So what approach we've taken is actually join the national efforts. Certainly all the work that Kunle has done, and I know that he's been working non-stop on this, and they have constantly been producing information, sharing that with us, having loads of meetings so that we can all participate equally, and putting in representation in the forms of messages and letters that have gone to government at every level, that they've been shared with us and we have been signatories to. So that is the approach we have taken. So I've, on behalf of the GM BAME network, being part of that, making sure that our region and our voice is heard and being signatory to that. And the last, I think, very detailed correspondence that was sent was to Matt Hancock, laying out our concerns about the most recent review that has come out from PHE, the Public Health Education, and England, sorry, and saying what actually is needed. So we hopefully will get more on that. I know that there are other things happening, and that there is apparently more information as part of that review coming out this week, and that the Equality Human Rights Commission have also launched a review. So there are things happening at pace, and we'll try and keep people informed about that. So I've got Elaine with your hand up. Can you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Sorry, it's so difficult with it's this new technology, but I'm here now. Sorry, thank you. So I put my question on the chat actually, but my question was in relation to this morning on, I think the programme is called This Morning. Nigel Farage was being interviewed, where he likened the Black Lives Matter movement to the Taliban, suggesting that, you know, black people are such a threat to this country, which I think is going to destabilize, has the potential to destabilize the Black Lives Matter movement or race equality movement. And my question is around, how do we counter this narrative effectively? Thank you.
Can I just bring in one other question as well, and then I'll bring in Kunle to respond to some of these things. And I did watch that this morning. It was horrific. Mark Anwar. Do you want to unmute yourself, Mark?
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Mark.
Good morning.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Sad to see that it has to take death of people for us in the world to recognize about our differences and how people actually do matter. That lives matter. You know, and the events that have been unfolding recently, again, you know, reported on the extreme to one side. I just want to say that we all suffer. Having been, you know, brought up in this country since the age of 10, and as Kunle said, 80s. My friend, I remember the 70s. So, you know, those times, getting your head kicked in at school by skinheads. You know, I don't think anything has changed, and I fear for our future generations. And it makes me so sad to see when we're trying to make things happen, that only people who say the right things or who have the right connections are the ones that are heard. I speak from a project called Project 29 in Bury, which I set up in 2007. And you know, I want to say that I've not had just as a side, I have funded this project myself, alone, set it up and funded it myself. Never had a penny from my local council, not one penny, not one penny. And I run a project, you'll see if you go to our website, project29.org.uk, you'll see what we do, who we are, what we're about. We're a media organization, basically, helping to train people, as well as setting up a community radio station. And I want to just say that it breaks my heart to see what's happening. And when our Home Secretary comes along yesterday and makes the comments that she does, very inflammatory comments, it hurt. It hurt.
Can I bring in Kunle just on the couple of points about what Nigel Farage did this morning and the views of the Home Secretary?
I'm not going to give this much time. I mean, Mark, you know what it's like in television and in media. Why would you invite Nigel Farage onto a program to discuss racism if you weren't looking for some kind of reaction? This is the way that programs are edited. I remember back in the day going on one of Trevor Phillips's programs on reparations, and in the room you would have the most extreme black nationalists on one side, and then you would have the most extreme racists on the other. That's how program editors work, you know, and I don't think you could take even the context in which that discussion was taking place seriously. Nigel Farage is entitled to voice his opinion, and he's entitled to actually say what he likes. But also, we shouldn't fall into the trap of thinking that this is actually where the debate is taking place. It's not. That's just a joke. I think we need to have a serious debate amongst ourselves. I mean, I slightly disagree with Mark. I do think things have changed. I think Manchester has changed. I think London has changed. The UK as a whole has changed in terms of its approach to race relations in a whole variety of different means. But that doesn't mean that there's enough. We know, for example, Bangladeshi academic performance has improved tenfold in the last 4 years. But the translation of Bangladeshi and Afro-Caribbean success into the employment market hasn't happened. In fact, there's many people are still faced with the same problems of trying to get jobs that were there in the recession of the 90s. Never mind, the 21st century. So I think we have to be able to distinguish what has improved and what's got better and what's still remained the same, or in some cases got worse. So, for example, the taking of DNA samples from young people wasn't a feature of the 1980s, but is very much a feature of the 21st century. In fact, in London, something like 75% of 16 to 25-year-olds now have their DNA on a police database, which is incredible. Think about that. 75% of our young people are on a DNA database in the South. It's incredible. So there are things that have changed. There are things that have not improved. And there are some things that we now have to encounter that we haven't had to address before. So, I think that the circumstances is very confusing at the moment in how we look at some of these issues. Obviously, COVID and the Public Health England reports alluded to issues of race. But I think at a time when we were looking to get some kind of scientific analysis of the issue, along with the social and economic, all we got was the social and economic, but not anything new. We were told that there's a disproportionate number of BAME people contracting the virus. We knew that already. What we don't know is the cause of that disproportionality. So we're still, I think, at stage one, and I can imagine, are young people bewildered to the point where they're thinking, well, if I'm from a BAME community, therefore I'm more susceptible to getting this thing, along with all the rest of the other things that we have to confront. Maybe at the moment, there's just a bit too much negativity and not enough focus on what it is positive about, dare I say it, being young, gifted and Black.
Can I just ask, Kunle, do you feel, I'm kind of feeling that we've got a massive storm at the moment. What's the feeling in London? Because I know, that in the regions we sometimes aren't fully engaged with some of that kind of at-pace debate that's happening. But what is the feeling of leaders in London? Are people just focused on just riding through this storm and getting through the other end, or is there a feeling that things will change?
I think there's a general feeling that something new must emerge out of this particular period. And I think nobody really has a handle on what that new thing is going to be. But I think that we need to talk, as somebody has said, and we need to be able to talk honestly and openly about some of these issues. On the 17th of June, Voice for Change will be dropping its reports on race and the charity sector. That was a project that we were due to launch on the 23rd of March, but due to the lockdown, we decided to pull the launch of that report. However, we are going to go ahead, as I say, on the 17th of June and launch that report, which is a piece of research carried out by Dr. Sanjeev Lingahe, and it involves interviews with over 500 people from our sector, from a variety of backgrounds, a variety of different positions in the sector, and different ethnic backgrounds too. So we are hoping that that document provides a catalyst for some of that honest discussion. But I think I don't want to also be looking to shut down white people from engaging in the discussion just because they may feel that they might get something wrong. We need to have a very different kind of discussion about race today. And if we're not honest about that, then I feel that we are going to be going round in circles again. So in terms of what this moment represents in London, I think is very similar in many ways to Greater Manchester. Lots of confusion, lots of anger and rage, but a determined, I think, feeling that something has to give, something has to change.
I've got a question from Syra and then Retta.
Hi, hello everybody. Thanks, Satya, for organising this, and good to meet you, Kunle. My question is regarding taking everything into account, looking at us who've been fighting this battle for years. I can remember. I was thinking in particular about the Bradford 12, for example. How many of them have died under the age of 60? There are very few of them left. I think, if any, there's probably 2 left out of the Bradford 12. The impact of this constant, relentless battle that we've had and I know them, and knew them personally, and I know I know Tariq Ali very well, personally. So I understand the whole concept of the change that is coming. My question is that what message could you give people like me and my age group and my, my fellow warriors? What message can you give us to stop us, to give us hope? Because sometimes we come to the point where we feel that it's just a treadmill, we're hamsters on this treadmill, and we're never going to get off. Not as long as and also the other thing is, it's not, for me, it's never been, and it isn't a battle between black and white. It's a battle between racism and everyone else. It's a battle against racism. You don't have to be any color for that. And at the moment, the issue is Black Lives Matters. We should all be 100% behind only Black Lives Matters, because until every life matters, especially Black lives at this moment, no lives will matter. So I don't know if that made sense, but
thank you, Syra. Can I just bring back Kunle to respond to that before I bring in Retta?
Just quickly, like you, Sarah, I remember the Bradford 12. In fact, one of my favorite books was Tariq Mahmoud's book on the actual campaign. And I met Tariq several years later. I don't even know if he's still around now, but also I discussed the campaign with Suresh and Satish Grover, were around at that time. For me, I wouldn't be as pessimistic. I think that, I look at these things and I see that my own kids have been brought up to believe that they can play a full role in society. And I think we've been successful in fulfilling our children with an optimism that they can actually be and do anything they like. So successful that at one point I actually felt that my kids were a bit naive in the way that they saw the world, and that they didn't really experience racism in the same way as we did as young people, as teenagers. But so on that level, I'm actually rather optimistic. What I think is more problematic is the focus on individual behavior as being the primary source of the problem of racism, rather than actually seeing it in political terms. And we seem to have lost that. Marcus Garvey and his movement in America had a very clear political program. People don't remember that. The civil rights movement in America had a very clear political program of liberation. The Indian Workers Association had at its core a very clear political outlook. The Pakistani Workers Association, all of these groups now have disappeared. So what you're left with is a vacuum. And at the heart of that vacuum is now Black Lives Matters. Now, I think what has happened has been amazing, but I'm not going to look at Black Lives Matters either uncritically. and say, well, you know, an organization that is sponsored by Google is now where we're at. The idea that my political outlook now is shaped by the views of Jamelia and Raheem Sterling, no matter how sincere, we need and demand and should be demanding better political commentators and analysts in terms of leadership. I just think that at the moment there's a bit of a hysteria, and we need some dust to settle before some coherent thinking comes out. You know, this morning I've been contacted by Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, to join a commission on statues and the memorials in London. You know, and straight away he's on the news nationally and on radio talking about stuff has got to go. And I'm thinking, so what are we going to do now? Tear up half the monuments in London as an anti-racist gesture? You know, there was a time when we wanted to go beyond symbols and we wanted real change. So I think we still have some thinking to do. Even I don't have all the answers. You know, I'm trying to work this stuff through myself and trying to process it. It's come in a very strange period when we're in lockdown, where we have a pandemic, and yet, you know, somebody asked me in an interview on RTTV on Friday, should we be respecting the lockdown, or should we be and condemning the protesters, or should people have a right to protest? And I'm very clear that in terms of the government guidance and guidelines, we have given up a huge part of our civil liberties under this lockdown. And the right to assembly, the right to protest, is a fundamental right of democracy. And that, I'm afraid, trumps everything, even, yes, a pandemic. That's not to say that people shouldn't wear masks, shouldn't try to distance appropriately. But, you know, I have to also be practical and understanding of, in a confused situation of a protest and demonstration, those things are not realistic. And as we know, even our own ministers and government advisors have found it difficult to maintain consistently their activities within the guidance of the state.
And you know, we recently, before that, had VE Day. We have done other things. You know, so lots of things have happened. So, you know, you've got to look at it from that perspective, from a public point of view. Can I bring in Retta? And I think we might not have any more time for questions after that. Retta.
Yes, thanks very much, Atiya, and thank you for hosting it today. And hello, everybody. My name's Retta Moore, and from Rapar, which is based in the city centre of Manchester, but we locked down our office the 16th of March. Most of our work is with people who are destitute and undocumented. And I did post up a little message before about a statement that we've put out in response to the attempt to criminalise the young people who tore down the statue in Bristol, and the relationship between that and Black Lives Matter, in the sense that all Black lives matter, including the destitute and the undocumented worker. And what we found through the pandemic is that people who were really, really on the edge because they were working illegally, when the lockdown happened, the work disappeared. So people have been moved into certain instances into even slavery, actually. We're aware of that happening, and I don't use the word lightly, in the sense of people who've no longer been able to access any money whatsoever and who are really so acutely vulnerable now. So we did put the open letter out on the 27th of March asking that Boris Johnson, and indeed Leo Varadkar, the Taoiseach of Ireland, offer status now for everybody, because this is a public health issue, as Kunle said before. It's about the relationship between what's happening to us in terms of our bodies and the significance of the environment in which we live for our ability to protect ourselves and each other from either getting COVID-19 or passing it on. And people who are in very, very poor environments, overcrowded environments, who don't have control over being able to keep their environment clean are more at risk of getting the virus. It's not that black people are the receptacle of the virus, it's that black people are in more poverty environments, which mean that people are more susceptible. One of the, I don't want to say too much more, but just a couple of things that, like everyone else here, we in RAPAR are really struggling with the amount of information that there is out there and the human capacity to absorb that information and make sense of what's going on. It's really such a demand on us all now. But I think one of the things we can say, and those of us who are long in the tooth know it the hard way, that when people speak racism, they make an environment where people who want to find an excuse for being violent will take that excuse. And that's why it's really dangerous to have any kind of racism being spoken without it being immediately challenged and stopped, because it breeds violence, and we know this. Every time there's racist statements, there's a spike in violence. So I think we have to find ways really to be very, very united in our unconditional support for the young people who are overwhelmingly young, and they are overwhelmingly multicultural. You look at everything that's out there, it's very multicultural, these demonstrations. But I also do think that it's very interesting, the call that's began in Minneapolis, coming through. It's been on the demonstrations in Britain about defunding the police, because it's a new kind of idea that is being expressed. And I think we have to go back to what Kunle was reminding us earlier. 75% of young people on DNA databases. And who's controlling those databases, and how are people being targeted? There's some very profound questions here. Just one last thing, a word I came across the other day that I'd never seen before. There is some writing now that's being done, and it's about, the concept is the syndemic, not the pandemic, but the syndemic, from synergy and pandemic, putting it together. And it's really what Kunle was saying before, the need to understand what's happening in terms of the disproportionate impact on black people of COVID when you put the pandemic in its environment. And when you put it in its environment, the fact that more black people are at risk or becoming sick or dying makes more sense. We've lost 2 leaders in RAPAR in the last 8 weeks. One of the leaders we lost from the Congolese community. Another of our leaders from the Congolese community, in his own personal network, has lost 30 Congolese people in Britain that he knows. And we lost our chair of 5 years 2 weeks ago. But it has to be, we have to bring forward the fact that the environment is instrumental here. And I do think that the government's response has been obscene, actually, and there's no other word for it. I think it was herd immunity by the back door at the end of the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Retta. Completely agree with everything that you've said, and really good kind of advice there, and good information you've shared with us. And I am really deeply sorry for the loss that you've had to some of your leaders who have done magnificent work in this city over many, many weeks. And I think your points about, kind of the destitute is a very, very well made point. I think those of us who have gone on the front line to kind of do support work to help people have very, very much, and I certainly have noticed this very much, that those who are destitute really haven't got anywhere to go, even on this whole issue around homelessness. And we know in GM lots of efforts were made to get people off the streets, but actually those who are in destitute and in very challenging situations are very fearful of even approaching there, because of the fear of how their information and data will be used. So they remain destitute, and even in a worse situation than they were before. So I think that underlying it, I think we don't actually know the biggest, the actual amount of impact that there is out there. And I think anecdotal information that you've just shared with us, we absolutely need, because even at a GM level, we are not seeing the actual stats for the impact of BAME communities. Using BAME doesn't seem very appropriate either, because we are talking about individual communities and individuals, and we really need to be far more intelligent and articulate about how we describe these situations. Can I just bring in finally Kunle to just comment on some of this, because I know you probably need to go soon, but also before you leave, just say a little bit about the national effort that's happening. And I really want to urge everybody to link up and join up with these national efforts, because some of those representations Retta's mentioned in terms of government changes we want have been made at the national level, and I've signed letters on that point on behalf of the sector. Kunle. You're on mute still.
Sorry. I'm going to just reference some of the stuff that's come through in the chat. In particular, somebody mentioned the death of Simeon Francis in Torquay, in the police cell. I think, again, going back to something I said earlier, there does seem to be a kind of perverse glamour with violence in the USA that we seem to have over here, and that we're able to connect with something like George Floyd, but when these things happen in our own country, it doesn't evoke the same response. And I think that is, in a way, a failure of our own anti-racist movement here. And we need to, I think, address that quite seriously. I mean, apart from the Mark Duggan affair in 2011, and we can go all the way back to the 1960s, to David Omowole, the only incidents of police officers being convicted for killing an individual. David Omowole was in Yorkshire, was a Nigerian vagrant who was systematically brutalized by police officers in that vicinity over several months until he was eventually chased to, I think it was one of the local canals, and drowned in the river. And as I say, it's the only incidence of police officers being convicted for brutalizing a citizen of color. And that's, you'd have to go all the way back to the 1960s. So I think that there is a challenge that's been thrown down to us. We have our own George Floyds here, and we need to keep our eyes and ears open. I think that in terms of the national stuff around COVID, well, it's great now to have Atia on the regular discussions with the Charities and Civil Society Minister, Baroness Barron. And I believe that those meetings now are going to be taking place either, I think, every fortnight or weekly, where this group will be able to feed directly into central government its own issues and arguments around what it thinks is going on. And I'm really pleased that Atia has actually made that step up and is now going to be speaking, as they say, directly to power. The next period for us, I think, having been extremely disappointed by the Public Health England reports or the lack of information contained therein, I think it's very much about now looking at the recommendations that we need to make in the absence of Public Health England coming forward with anything. I know there's a second phase to the report, but the Coalition of Race Equality Organisations has already submitted a letter as of last Friday, identifying what we consider to be key recommendations, particularly around things like PPE, and also, as somebody has alluded to, in terms of the tracking initiative the government wants to pursue. You cannot do that unless there is some kind of legitimation of undocumented workers. And that means basically, from my perspective, and this is my personal view, I think we have to call for an amnesty for all illegal immigrants during this period. And I know that that's controversial. And I know that there's lots of people who disagree with me, but I think if we're going to track this virus, then we have to do it sensibly. And the only way you're going to do that is if people can openly come forward and declare themselves. So, that's my view. So anyways, great talking to you. I'm sorry I can't stay longer, but I'm already overrunning with my other meeting. I'd like to come back, and I've really kind of enjoyed the questions and people's commentary, and I'm sure that you're going to have a great meeting the rest of the time. So anyway, thank you.
Kunle, thank you so much for coming and participating, and please come again, and we'll invite you to come again. And thank you for all the amazing work you're doing at national level. On behalf of all of us, thank you very much for that.
Okay, bye-bye.
Just to say to you all that I did invite Professor Kevin Fenton, who was the lead for the PHE review. Of course, for one reason or the other, people are very, very busy at this point in time, and he couldn't make this meeting. But what it has led to is conversations with the Northwest PHE team. So that is a good thing, which means that we can be more focused on the GM with that team, which is more responsible for what's happening here. And I am in conversation with them, and they will be speaking soon at the GM BAME Leaders Forum, so that we can begin to see what is actually happening on a GM footprint from a PHE point of view. So that's going to be quite important for us in terms of what we can influence at our levels, as well as all the work that we do at a national level. So I know we're kind of running a little bit late, but I thought that was really useful to have Kunle here with us and give you an opportunity to hear about what's happening at a national level. What I want to move into is actually hearing from some of our leaders at a GM level, and some of those leaders from those communities that have been more significantly impacted by this. Now, I won't have been able to bring all of them in because many people have been impacted by this, and listening to Retta this morning, and I'm glad she'd come in. That reflection in terms of the wider communities was absolutely important. So I'm going to bring them in, but just before I do that, I'm going to bring in Mark, who's going to say a little bit about the next 1 or 2 minutes of a poll he's going to do. Mark, are you there?
Yes, thanks, Atia. I've got 3 quick fire questions for the audience, if I may. So I'm going to launch 3 questions, and then after the 3 questions, I'll come back with the answers. Thank you.
How the weather with like women and a bit of wild weeding's been going on Saturday with you. Not the only midlife woman who will be having to endure a bit of an
Few seconds left for that one. I know 38 of the 45 participants have taken part. Okay, I'm going to close that now. Second question. You would have a minute to complete this. Thank you. 10 seconds left for those who are still pondering. Okay, that's that one. And one final question for now. Ten seconds for those who haven't. Okay. So poll 1, I'll share the results for you. Poll 2. And finally, poll 3. That's it. There's obviously discussions around each of them 3 polls and what participants feel and have said in regards to their reaction to the polls. But I'll leave that for you.
Great. I think not many surprises there. Okay, are we done?
Yep, we're done. I'm done for now.
Right, do you want to remove the poll now? Fab, can we move? I'm just going to leave it at that. I mean, it's an interesting kind of little poll to do, isn't it? Every time we kind of meet on different things, I think, and it gives us the advantage of doing that, but not many surprises in that, I think, but it's a good information piece to use in terms of the numbers who are on this call today. I'm going to move quite swiftly because we are kind of eating into our time. I've got a panel of people who are going to pop in and make a contribution of a few minutes each, really just to give a bit of a sharing of information about the impact on their communities. Can I bring in Circle Steele, Chief Officer from YN Chinese Association first?
Hi, morning. Thank you. Thanks, Atya. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I just share about during the pandemic lockdown, some reflection on the impact of the COVID-19 community, and some example I give about race incident and the challenge of supporting people from the community, Chinese community. Just share some. The Miss A is a Chinese single mother of young children. She experienced domestic violence and moved out of the family home into separate accommodation during the lockdown. In the new accommodation, she experienced hostile from the residents and who called her coronavirus because she was Chinese. She was extremely anxious about the racial comment and attitude toward her and her children. This resulted in her deciding to moving back to the family home and her ex-husband, despite him being the perpetrator of the domestic abuse. While supporting victims of domestic abuse has been high on the public agenda, for Ms. A, she had to choose between a domestic abuse situation and experiencing racial discrimination. In the end, we were able to support her situation so she could move out to her current accommodation, and we report the waste incident to the hate crime department. Now, during the COVID-19 has also led to another challenging situation for the Chinese community. Understand the public health message. An older Chinese couple contacted us to request some face masks as PPE, given that Mr. B was an older carer for his partner. He needed to go to the Reno Dialysis Center multiple times per week, and also little face masks when shopping. Now, on 15th of April, when our support worker delivered boxes of masks to their home, help was given to translate some letter for the elderly couple, which including letter from the GP advising Mr. B to shield himself for 12 weeks, and he was considered as a high-risk patient. The letter was discovered 4 weeks after the government. Now, we will immediately explain the letter to the couple, sharing what support we were able to provide, including essential to support the vulnerable. I followed up the phone call to Mr. B, the English-speaking GP, to highlight this concern, to ensure that shielded patients were aware of the situation. Now, this incident also raised concern about the lack of translated material for BAME community, especially English the second language, to understand such important and vital communication. It raised the question of how many in the UK has had this problem. Now, in another shooting-related case, is a shooting letter was sent to address Miss C. She died 3.5 years ago, and it was very upsetting and shock to the family. Why Mrs. C still receiving a GP letter? Yeah, and one of the 1.5 million shooter people, how many are alive, and how many has been followed up from the government? I stated that while we must protect vulnerable people during the lockdown period, that is such experience have taught me that the vulnerable are becoming more vulnerable. We find ourselves not only fighting COVID-19, but also needing to tackle inequality and racial hate. So I would like to share this message. I mean, this one we talk about Black Lives Matter. We say spread love, not hate. I mean, together we can stand equally and successfully to fight COVID-19. Thank you.
Thank you, Circle. I know that issue very early on when the shielding letters went out. It was a big issue actually for everybody because they were quite, I think they were 4-page, quite wide, detailed letters, which were sent to people not translated or anything like that. Community organizations that were normally available to support people to understand what was sent to them, official things like that, weren't there to help them, not accessible in the way that they have been before. So we know that that had probably got an impact as well in terms of early on how we dealt with how information was shared and communicated on that basis. And I know that when right at the start, NHS England hadn't really prioritised information and communication in vast different languages. That was a mistake. And then, of course, lots has happened in the charity sector to address that, and then eventually at a local authorities level to address that. So that's been a big issue.
But also,
and of course,
when the government deal with the pandemic, this situation, they haven't considered the BAME community, the need. Yeah. Well, I look back, if they inform the community first, then they issue the letter. When we are locked down, and then we know they issue those letters 4-page long, we're very worried and struggle. It's also government they think about the BAME community, the whole country.
Yep.
Yeah, we are not the only one. English, the second language, a lot of community members will miss out those situations. Yeah.
And then the other side of that, of course, is that we have a lot of digital challenges within our communities as well. So to then try and connect with people to help them, you know, all of that, you know, so much was not understood in terms of community needs. Can I bring in Khadija next to say a little bit about, you know, from your point of view, in terms of the communities in Rochdale, which, you know, is quite large South Asian communities in Rochdale. What's been the impact?
Good morning, everyone. Well, where can I start? Rochdale's always been in the forefront, always for the wrong reasons. And I don't need to rake through history and whatever to, you know, remind people of what those reasons were. When we first encountered lockdown, I must say that the early response, emergency response, I think it was common right across the board, but it wasn't very well coordinated, and it wasn't very you know, and I can't, I'm not pointing the finger of blame for this, because, you know, we were all caught out in this. However, you know, where you've got almost a quarter of the people, residents in Rochdale, according to the last census, belonging to BAME communities, I think, you know, there could have been a bit more response and focused attention being paid to the impact on the minority communities. Even now, you know, we're still in a bit of a precarious position with the R rate, the R number still being significantly high in the Northwest. So we're not over it yet. So there's still, you know, we still need to be cautious. We still need to be, you know, mindful of ongoing impact on BME community. As I was saying, just similar to Circle and the experiences of other people, our communities have suffered. We've struggled as an organisation in terms of reaching the people through our normal means, because obviously we were in lockdown as well. We were, you know, told to, you know, not be operational. We had to look after our own families as well. So in the early stages, we were very much torn between, you know, complying and being, you know, mindful of public health advice, but also at the same time struggling with the fact that the people that need our help most we aren't able to reach out to them. We're not able to help them as we would have done normally. Adifa rightly pointed out, digital technology, not everybody is, you know, able to access information digitally. Not everybody is able to, you know, access the help they need at the time they need it most, you know, through the virtual means, through the non-contact means. In terms of who's going to be impacted most, just like everybody else, you know, obviously within the communities, we've got vulnerable people, the elderly, young people, women, you know, anecdotally, we're getting reports of an increase in domestic violence, but that's not unusual under the circumstances when the people are in those conditions. But nevertheless, we need to be mindful of that. We're getting feedback that, you know, tensions within families, within communities are rising. And again, that's not surprising. You could say that that's happening all across the board. But when you're living in a locality where, you know, you've got various health inequalities, various sort of other inequalities in play, I think the public sector, government, local government, as well as national government needs to focus in on prevention now to avoid potential difficulties at a later stage. We've got the continuing situation with children not being able to go back to school. We have a nursery within our facilities, and we're mindful, and we've been talking to parents of health workers and other people that have been sending their children to school, children to nursery. They've got anxieties about, well, you know, these children were meant to be moving up to primary school. What's going to happen to them now? They're already lagging. They feel that they're already lagging behind in educational terms, in attainment terms. Through our nurseries and provision, we're able to support them become school ready. But because of the current situation, what are we doing, and how can we help them to overcome the future barriers and future problems that they're likely to encounter? Similarly, Rochdale, you know, is known for levels of unemployment, levels of need amongst younger people. Younger people, because of the situation, it's all anecdotal because the data is slowly coming through. Parents and communities are fearful of their young people becoming, well, anxious, annoyed, suffering from mental health issues, and maybe leaning towards crime or criminal activity because of what their fears for the future, what's going to happen to them in terms of employment, unemployment, etc. When even before COVID, that was a concern already. So I'm saying, and I'm trying to lobby and work with anybody who's willing to work with us as an organization. I think we need to now look at forgetting, you know, our particular businesses and a particular part in our particular organizations, and we need to now look at working much more collaboratively, much more collectively to try and address the situation jointly, because unless there is a joint dedicated approach, not only between BAME organisations, but BAME organisations in Rochdale, BAME organisations in Greater Manchester, the public sector, national government, unless our voices and our needs and issues are heard, I think there's going to be a widening in the gap of inequalities all around, at all levels. And that's an issue that we need to tackle and address collectively now before it gets out of hand. I think there's sufficient desire and willingness to work together. So let's use this opportunity. I love the word that was introduced in my vocabulary. Let's use this syndemic to try and pull together the willing people within our organizations, within our communities, to make a change for the better. I don't like that word, that phrase either, but I love the sentiment behind it. Let's try and you know, make good out of a really bad situation, and this is where I'm coming from.
Nadia, you're on mute.
Atiha, can you unmute, please?
Yeah, I'm unmuting myself. I don't know whether Charles is with us. Is Charles with us? Okay, can I move on to Davine next then? And I think Charles was at another meeting. He will join us at some point. Davine from Manchester BME Network.
Hi everyone. Now, talking about COVID, I actually experienced COVID, and for me, not just me, myself and my 3 other siblings, we all had COVID, but was all treated differently. Now, looking at the government information that was around beforehand, I personally don't think that there was enough, because they knew about it since last year and didn't let anyone know. I had been to my GP from February and kept saying I had this pain in my chest. I was struggling to breathe. They kept telling me it's just a chest infection. Even Atia kept saying to me, have they not sent you for an x-ray? Which they didn't. So I went along with the chest infection and was taking antibiotics, several antibiotics, and was getting weaker and weaker. Within this time, 2 of my sisters were admitted to hospital. The only question I was ever asked by my GP was, have you been to Wuhan? Do you surround yourself with Chinese people? Which wasn't very helpful. And that was a GP. Anyway, one sister ended up in hospital for 11 weeks. She came out last week. One was in for 2 weeks. And my brother, he'd called NHS 111 and was told, we'll call back in a few days' time if you're still feeling this bad. Fortunate for me, my GPs then were checking in with me twice a week. I had my sons at home who were literally showing them how I looked through Skype, and they were sending antibiotics because my GP was saying, we don't want you in hospital. And after all of this, then I got my shielding letter. So I got a shielding letter in April, when I'd already had it. A 4-page letter which told you to stay indoors, and, but even going through that, you couldn't really understand it, and because it didn't really give you much information. It was just the basics. Now, for me, we need to know more about COVID, but even though we work in the voluntary sector, I don't think it needs just to be targeted at the poor. I mean, my sisters are not in the situation that I'm in. We don't live in the same household. They all have their own houses. They live in the affluent parts of Trafford and in Chorlton, but they still had it. And a lot of the impact initially was it was going to be on the poorest, because of the poor housing, the lack of money. But I think they need to do a more conscious research into this, because actually we've had consultants that have died from it. We've had people all across society that have died from it, different ages. So it's shown that even the bit that they were giving was inaccurate, because they were saying older people wouldn't survive from it. And even my friend's dad was 83. He went to hospital. They tested him, he had it. And they said, well, you've lived through, what they told the family was, he's lived through 3 strokes. He's quite fortunate to have reached to 83. And we could keep him in hospital, but they wouldn't ventilate him because somebody younger needed the ventilator. I mean, fortunate for him, he did come through it. But even the way as BME people were treated, it was different across the border. So I think, the impact of research needs to go much, much more deeper than just the surface things that they're sending us at the moment, personally. Thanks, Atia.
Thank you, Davine, and thank you for sharing your personal story. I think it's a very powerful impact in terms of just listening to somebody with a lived experience of how things happen, because for many of us, we hear things, but actually to hear people we know amongst us, I think that's a frightening thing. We know many people amongst us with these experiences, and at some point, I think we do need that mixed experience, lived experience conversation with those people. And, I think some of our service providers need to do that urgently as they are looking to build better for the future, how they can learn from those lessons. It's very, very important. Can I bring in Dr. Safina Islam, who works with the chair of Bangladeshi Women's Association. Are you there, Safina?
Hi, Atia. Yeah. Hi, everyone. I thought I'd just make a few points, because quite a lot of what people have said already are really pertinent to the experiences of our service users and our community. I thought I'd start with a couple of positives though in terms of our experiences and the reflections. I think one of the things that I knew already but was reinforced is that we are an incredibly resilient and adaptive bunch of women, and I think over the years, over the decades, we've had to be. And I think what we saw were the women really mobilising and using their sort of skills to be able to support their families and each other. I think we had already got sort of information from our friends and family in London, from abroad, how it was impacting the Bangladeshi community more than other communities. And I think we started having discussions about lockdown and about how we can social distance and restrict social activities late in February and early in March. And we were really waiting for the government to announce the restrictions. So we were really well placed to do it. I think one of the things that we found really difficult initially, as people have said earlier, is that the information coming out, it wasn't culturally specific, it wasn't nuanced enough. There was a lot of fear mongering, there was a lot of sort of assuming that people would adhere to cultural expectations rather than social distancing requirements, and sort of not helpful kind of assumptions being played out in both the media and sort of information that was being circulated. So we had to do quite a lot of work within our sort of communities, with our staff and our board, sort of working with our service users to kind of say, no, what you're doing is right, continue to do that. And we had to sort of look within ourselves and the expertise within our own communities to support the messaging, because the messaging coming out wasn't really helpful for us. I think as well, we transitioned to sort of digital engagement quite quickly and working remotely. There was definitely an issue of the digital divide and quite a lot of people not always having access to that, but there also was quite a lot of women who did have access to smartphones. I think one of the things that we saw is they weren't necessarily, they're not going to use Zoom on a daily basis or Microsoft Teams and a lot of platforms that public sector or that we use sort of in our professional lives, but using platforms like WhatsApp and IMO, we've successfully had sort of lunch groups and coffee mornings, and our staff have been kept really busy, still being able to support service users just using phone and video calling. And it's worth bearing in mind, we kind of assume that a lot of sort of BAME communities are behind in terms of digital technology, but we keep in touch with our families and friends abroad. We still keep in touch with what's going on globally, and we do that using technology. We just don't necessarily use the technology that are used by mainstream organisations. So I think that's one of the things that we also need to think about when we're trying to communicate with different communities. I think I wanted to just raise a couple of points about the Public Health England report that was really unhelpful. I think, and I've had lots of questions and lots of people coming to me and asking about this highest risk to Bangladeshi communities. I think one of the things for us is that we weren't really surprised. We know this, we know we have a disproportionate risk, both compared to the general population and within the South Asian or BAME population. I think the problem is trying to convince commissioners and providers of this. I think data's got a lot more nuanced and a lot more analysis has been done, but the solutions are still really blunt. They're still for either the South Asian community or the BAME community, and they're not really for us. So people don't necessarily come to us to ask for the solutions. They've already got a solution half sort of designed, and they say, so, you know, and they give a broad brush. So I think that's one of the things that has really come out for me in that we really need more nuanced and specific, culturally appropriate, and also we need people to work with us specifically to answer some of those questions. We've had to do a lot of work looking to ourselves to support our service users. So we definitely have that expertise within our staff, within our board, with our members who've been really active supporting those that are really vulnerable. I think I'm just going to finish on a couple of things that are really concerning me for the future. I think with, you know, the really unhelpful, unuseful kind of messaging and not really understanding what's happening in communities, there's been a huge issue around trust. And I think it's taken a long time for this trust to establish with, you know, a lot of communities, with a lot of public sector organisations, and they're not really thinking about how, if you're not seeing how we're suffering, how we're being able to have to, you know, how we're having to take care of our own in this situation now, how are you then going to repair that and carry on? This is not going to be business as usual when we've suddenly got a vaccine for COVID. And I think there's no real thinking or joined up sort of effort around how they're going to address that. You know, when I look at, you know, two of the big issues that our organisation deal with around, you know, mental health and domestic abuse, it was hard enough before this, before the kind of issues that are happening, you know, and how that's going to change going forward needs some really serious sort of work. I also think the broader sort of social determinants, not just around health, really impact this. And you know, one of the comments that was made by Kunle earlier about in the last 4 years, Bangladeshi pupils have improved. I think one of the things I'd say, again, this is about the sort of the analysis of the data, and it's really nuanced. It's improved in London for those that are second generation. So if both your parents are British born Bangladeshi, then you are doing better in terms of your GCSE attainment. That then drops off after GCSE. You don't do as well as A-level. If you do well in A-level and you get to Russell Group University, you don't get a first class degree. Not because you're not capable, because that's actually where the issue is. It's because the environment isn't supporting you in that way. So thinking about, again, Greater Manchester and the attainment and our young people here, we're still not there. We're still not improving, particularly for our young girls. Even when we're doing well at Key Stage 1, 2, it drops off. So there's an issue around that. And I think as well, all the other complex things around socioeconomic environment. You know, a lot of our community work in catering, workers, you know, drivers work in a really precarious 0 hours. They all lost their incomes during COVID, and there was no real safety net. It was just straight onto universal credit. So a lot of these families are going to be getting into debt. They've used all their savings, they've used all their reserves. So again, there's a time bomb of socioeconomic, like, not just in terms of compared to the wider, you know, community, but even more so. So I think there's quite a lot that we really need to focus on and unpick going forward.
Thank you, Safina. Thank you for raising so many different issues in your contribution. And I think you're absolutely right. As we move forward, we are going to see bigger impacts and other big issues kind of coming that we're going to have to deal with. Us as a sector is going to have to step up in terms of the kind of work that we're doing, and also adjust to everything so that we are understanding the needs so much better and that we're able to respond to that. And, you know, commissioners need to be listening up and loosening some of those structures and the barriers and actually, be thinking about supporting communities and getting things back to some sort of equality. So, we are going to see widening inequalities here.
We've actually, but we've actually seen things going backwards with a lot of funders actually excluding sort of small BAME grassroots organisation from their emergency pots. I've also seen lots of work that started, I think somebody mentioned this earlier, around working with diversity and inclusion and groups, like sort of that dropping off the agenda, because that's the kind of thing that you do when you've got time and resources. It's not the kind of thing you do now, and all those relationships are just being dropped. So I think there's a huge
a lot of panic reactions rather than kind of thought through kind of things that are happening. And I think the other big worrying thing is that many funders have now had to put funding into this emergency situation. So we are getting a lot of emergency reactions, some of it fantastic, some of it not sure. And I think that once that storm has blown, we will find there's a lot less money in the system. So local government is beginning to have, information from government in terms of their, negotiated budgets, etc., which are much, much, much smaller than they've been used to. We will see drops in all of these things happening. So what we'll see ahead of us, I'm not sure, but certainly a much widening of inequalities. Now, the GM system has recognized this. So what I do know is that there is a setting up happening at the moment, at this moment, for an inequalities panel to be set up at a GM level. So again, we'll let you know how that happens. We've got a GM leaders meeting this Thursday where we have invited Pam Smith, who is the CEO of Stockport Borough Council, who's the leading chief executive officer around those issues, to tell us more about what is actually happening and what is on the agenda. Lots of things are happening. So, like somebody said earlier, I think everything is so fast paced that it's really, really difficult to keep up with everything. And one easy way is actually being part of some things like this so that we can keep ourselves informed and share with each other openly and be collaborative. I'm going to bring our last speaker on this panel, Charles, who's joined us from CAN, which is the Caribbean African Health Network. Charles, welcome. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
A few minutes for you, Charles.
Yeah, so thanks for organizing, this important webinar. So I'm Charles, Chief Officer for the Caribbean and African Health Network, and just a few things. So we've been linking in with, some of the stuff that Atia has been working on and leading the Greater Manchester BME Leaders Forum to do. And then we also connect on national level through the work that is done by CORE and other points as well. And we work with the Caribbean and African community across Greater Manchester, but we also conscious of the fact that, what we do must tie into the wider BAME agenda. So, quite recent, we've also had to move a lot of our stuff online, and we have been making representations. We've been part of some of those roundtable conversations around the disproportionate impact with, the BAME, community. And, one of the things we've been saying is a trick was missed because at the start of the pandemic, the language, but also getting leaders from our communities to engage with the subject or to communicate what was happening, didn't really happen. It started late, but, there are some positives and there should be learning that we should take in going forward. We've made a representation, following the Public Health England report, that was published. And clearly, I was on the news saying we, as a BAME community, we're really disappointed because what we were promised is different from the reports, that was published. So we are currently hoping that Greater Manchester, and as Atia mentioned, I will be there, in the meeting on Thursday. But we're hoping that at Greater Manchester level, some work will be done around where the disparities exist, and some conversations with Black-led, BAME-led organizations about how we begin to address some of the structural issues we have, so that whatever we do is not a quick fix thing, but for the long term, obviously there are issues right now, about the Black Lives Matter and all the tensions within, communities. And I think this is the right moment to be having some of these conversations. So yes, we're going to be firmly part of, all the work that the Greater Manchester BME Leaders Forum will be doing. And it's important that we keep making representations in the media. So whether Sky, Granada, BBC, we need to be showing our faces as BAME communities and be talking about how our communities have been impacted. And we need to engage with the Equalities Minister because, for many of you who would have watched whether it's Sophie Reed on Sunday or Andrew Marr, the health secretary was pinned about representation in cabinet. And we need to be conscious about the fact that sometimes there will be people from our communities who sit around the table, but they might be in slightly privileged position, or they will not, have a recognition for, the inequalities and the day-to-day challenges that people face. So whether it's about, changing no recourse to public funds, and you have, our Home Secretary who, we all know is from a BAME background, but doesn't really understand why that should happen, then there are some real, there's a real battle on our hands. And this is a time where, I think collectively we need to be affirming each other's messaging and working collaboratively. Thanks, Atia.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Charles. I do need to move on, but I know Khadija's been waiting to say something, so I'm going to bring her in at this point. Khadija?
Sorry about that. Just to say, it's probably out of context now, but I attended a virtual meeting yesterday where we were looking at the impact on BAME businesses of COVID. And I thought it would just be interesting to share with you that when we did a poll, like we did on this session, 68% of the BAME businesses and participants that were on, and then there were over 100 and something participants, 68% were not able to access government business support for one reason or other. And 65% found that the information from government about business support was unclear. So in terms of, not only the impact on communities, but also the impact on charities, as well as other types of businesses, BAME businesses, is clear there. So I thought I'd share that with you.
Thank you very much, Khadija. I'm going to bring this session to a round because I think we're kind of running out of time quite fast. Apologize to anybody I've not been able to bring in, but if you leave your questions, I will definitely promise to come back to you. And if we have time towards the end, again, I'll try and bring you in. I think it's been a useful update. I can't really say that it's been a huge, comprehensive kind of information session on everything, because there is so much happening and so much happening at such massive pace. There is a lot of conversations happening at national level, and Kunle alluded to that, and Charles did. We are trying our best to represent the sub-region and GM BAME network as much as we can, and to step into as much discussion and conversation and give that input in terms of the representation of the communities that we represent here and the different demographics we have in the region to other places. So that is happening in a massive way. I can tell you that my workload is probably at least 50 to 60% more than it was before, just on that national agenda. If people are interested to ask me about all of that, please do. It's a very, very open and transparent about everything we're doing. We try and share this with our Leaders Forum, and at the Leaders Forum, we have the representation of the 10 districts, and we try and, on a strategic level, provide that wider information so that those leaders can then share that with people in their districts. But I know that as a BME sector, we are not that well funded, and our infrastructures are weak, and that we haven't got those deeper links. So it's really important that you step in here and you just ask us and we can share whatever information we want. We have also set up over this period a COVID BAME page on the GMCVO website. So on there we try and put on everything that we can that's coming out, both in terms of information, in terms of reports, in terms of materials and resources that you can use, any funding that's coming on stream. So that is a good source. In addition to that, you may have local infrastructure organizations also doing that sharing, which will be fantastic. Because we're now at 11:41, I'm going to move on to our next agenda item, which hopefully will be a little bit more uplifting than all the conversation we've had for the last hour and a half. And then I do have my very dear friend, Mark, who is going to share some stuff around funding, which I can see that he's been sharing on the chat as we've been going along, which is fantastic and very, very helpful. And I am going to suggest for those of you who are waiting for that particular slot, not to worry. So if we kind of run out of time, we'll try and stay on for another 10, 15 minutes, if that's okay with Mark. And for those of you who want to hear about the opportunities on that, stay on, and then we can share that with those who have the time, because I know everybody's time is short. Great. So I'm going to move on to the next bit, which is a good news story in terms of what's happening. And I love this because I think that this is a way in which our work and our amazing work that happens in the sector gets some recognition. And a number of organizations have had that recognition. I think what I'm going to do is, if Paul Griffiths doesn't mind, I'm going to bring in Paul first, because again, I'm mindful that he may have other things to go on to, and just introduce this section by telling us about the Queen's Awards for Voluntary Service. And the people we are going to be hearing from are all winners of that award this year, which is fantastic. So Paul, are you there? Paul
Yes.
is our Vice Lord Lieutenant of Greater Manchester. I'm very, very pleased you're able to join us, Paul. So if you could tell us a little bit about that to enlighten people and encourage others would be great.
Yes, of course. Good morning, Atia. How are you? Good. Good. Good morning, everybody else too. Great pleasure to be in a position to congratulate the winners that you have with us today, and also to say a little bit more about the future in terms of the Queen's Award. First of all, congratulations to Wonderfully Made Woman for their success in this coveted award, and the Bangladeshi Women's Organisation, and also the North Manchester Black Health Forum. Tremendous initiative. Well done, everybody. The Queen's Award was first introduced many years ago by Her Majesty to celebrate her coronation. And it was to celebrate a jubilee, in fact, but every year now on the anniversary of the Queen's coronation, the announcement is made of the winners of the Queen's Award across the UK. And I must say, actually, I know you put a tremendous amount of effort into this over the course of the last years. And it's because of your efforts also that the awareness of the award scheme has been raised to a high level. So thank you for your contribution, Atia. In terms of the award scheme itself, the reason why everybody should be so thrilled who's won this award is that it is a recognition of the tremendous work that each organisation and its volunteers have achieved over the course of many years. And it's a very difficult award to win. Many people go after it, but unfortunately, at least half of the nominations do not actually succeed, because this award is actually a national award, and every single winner competes against everybody else in the UK in terms of volunteering and in terms of good work. And it's that very high bar that we have to scale that makes this particularly wonderful award to win. Now, in recent years, we've had success in Greater Manchester, which we're all delighted about, in that we have managed to find a way of recognising as many groups as we can. And the key thing here is to say that those groups need to be outstanding. They need to be the best that they can be. And they actually have to be not only the best in Greater Manchester, but also the best in the United Kingdom. And that's what makes this a very coveted and priceless award. And that's why you deserve every single bit of congratulation that you receive and all the plaudits that you receive too. Now, in terms of the way ahead, for those organisations on the call who know of organisations who they believe are outstanding and exceptional, the important thing is to try and encourage somebody to nominate the group, and these forms are available from the Lieutenancy website, and actually can circulate the details to everyone. And you nominate a group, and I always suggest that it has to be somebody that knows a group well. You cannot nominate yourself. You have to be nominated by someone else. And you have to be an organisation that's been operating for at least 3 years. And the other criteria is that there must be at least 2 people in the organisation. 2 people. The other criteria is that over half of the people must actually be volunteers and not paid help, because it is a volunteer scheme after all. And you'll see from the information that you read in due course, it isn't difficult. It's all done online, and it's a very good but very robust process. And ATIA is involved with myself and other deputy lieutenants to assess groups, usually around December time, for this award. The deadline this year for nominations is the 25th of September, and I hope that many of you that can will look to groups and nominate them, because it is a truly great award. And I know personally how good it makes people feel, especially in these difficult times, to win this wonderful award. So I hope you can do that. And many, many congratulations again to all of the wonderful winners that I referred to at the beginning. So congratulations, and thank you, Atia.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you. It's absolutely wonderful. And I think, Paul, on that note about how wonderful it makes you feel, is absolutely correct. I know that when we're involved with doing assessments, and we go and talk to groups and try and get as much information out and try and put that forward for them, that takes a lot of time to do that well. And the groups are really engaged in that process. But and then it takes quite a while for this to get through. And when they finally get the news, it's absolutely an amazing thing for the volunteers. So I know I've spoken to many who have had that, and it's just a fantastic thing for them to be recognised in that way. So I'd really urge you all to think about who's around you. I'm going to bring in our wonderful winners to say a few words about their experience of receiving this and what it means to them. So can I bring in Ehanor first from Wonderfully Made Women? Well done, Ehanor.
Hello, everyone. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much, Atia, for bringing me to the forum. I want to say it's been an overwhelming experience, to be honest. I haven't gotten over the award. I'm still, getting all in. We've been on for the past 8 years. And in that 8 years, it's been very, very challenging. We've only been working with restricted funds, sometimes without funds at all. But our passion just kept us going and going. So to have received that award, it shows that people recognize what we do and they appreciate it. That makes it very great for us, really. So I'm really excited, I'm delighted. It's also a challenging time because we have to also step up now, winning that award. And to crown it all this morning again, the COVID period, we've been working very hard, extended our working hours with the volunteers. I also received a letter from the Lord Lieutenant appreciating the fact that I have gone far and beyond in providing African food for the African community. We have provided for over 435 people as at last week. So it's been a wonderful time. And this organization honestly wouldn't have continued without some people. And I just want to use the opportunity to say a very big thank you to Athia for supporting me, you know, making me not to give up, to Reverend Charles, who has been there, you know, at that time I almost closed the charity, you know, in holding on to say, you know what, you can make it. I want to say thank you to Safina as well. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you all. Maybe without the three of you and some other people who are not on this group right now, we would have given up years ago. But thank you for standing by us. And I know that it's just the beginning of better things ahead. So thank you, everyone. And I want to thank God as well.
Well done. Fantastic. No, thank you so much. I know it's your really hard efforts and your hard work and your commitment and passion that's well deserves the recognition. So thank you very much. Can I move on to Hasina from the Bangladesh Women's Organization, Ananna, who have worked in the city for many years. And what a well-deserved award. Hasina, how do you feel about that?
Hi everyone. Yeah, it's really overwhelming and sort of like buzzing, and I think it's really nice for us because it sort of like coincides with our 30th anniversary as well. Big thank you to our board. Safina's here as well, who really go above and beyond, and I'm always texting and asking her. She's always there with all the helpful advice and information, and just a big support as well. I think for us, our volunteers that help us with our activities and our weekly sort of normal circumstances stuff, for them, they can't volunteer in traditional places because of trust issues, lack of confidence, language barriers, so many other different small things as well. So for them, it's massive for us, you know, for them to come to us and, you know, give their expertise, because we all have different things that we can offer, and it's just creating them opportunities as well. Yeah, thank you to all that's helpful and supportive, and I think, you know, 30 years we've done a lot, and hopefully we can carry on for another 30 years. So thank you to everyone.
Thank you, Hasina. Well done. I know how hard your organization works and how long it's been working in the sector, and how many women you have supported over those years. It's absolutely wonderful. Thank you very much. Can I bring in Ruqayyah from North Manchester Black Health Forum? Again, Ruqayyah, I know that you have been running your organization for a very long time, and you know, it's really deeply important because North Manchester is not that well served by organizations supporting our communities, and yet the demographics are massive in North Manchester for our communities. So your work is very well regarded and it's benefiting a lot of people. So how do you feel about your award? Well done for it.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Yes, similar to Bangladeshi Women's Association, we've been around 30 years, or more or less 30 years, and I have been involved from the day one. It's fantastic, and it's really fantastic for our volunteers. Unfortunately, most of them are shielding, so, you know, we were unable to sort of celebrate as we wanted to. But being recognized for something that you do it naturally is something that you do, and volunteers just come in and they deliver it. And again, most of our volunteers are older people who just come in because they feel connected to the organization as well. They get something out of it. Some of them because their mum used to come to the center and so on. So it's a massive achievement. I think we were one of those organizations who kept our heads down and just get on with it. To be nominated and to be recognized by all the good people and you know, our elected members as well is something quite new to us, actually. You know, it's quite hard to getting used to as well. It is hard times, and it's come a really good time, as like everybody's saying, because 90% of our services are face-to-face with people, and we're having to learn to adapt and develop. Positive side of that is that we're learning new skills, and our volunteers are having to learn new skills, but at the same time we're getting more volunteers with our meal delivery. people are volunteering, coming in, you know, to deliver that, and everybody is happy. And so we shared it obviously on Twitter and everything, but when we ring people, they're actually crying to say, well, you know, it's lovely to be recognized. So yeah, we're very happy about it.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Rukia. And a big applaud to you all, really. It's been absolutely amazing. And I know that Paul might not have said this, but Paul does the most amazing work for us in Greater Manchester. And because of his amazing work, we have had the highest numbers of Queen's Awards in this sub-region nationally. And we continue to keep that benchmark high because of Paul's work and because of his training for the rest of us deputy lieutenants, so that we can do the best job possible for our community organisations who serve us. So thank you so much to everybody, and thank you, Paul, for that. Just a few minutes before we finish, if I can move on, and I just want to bring in a couple of things I think people wanted to say. So I think Maya, I don't know whether Maya's still with us, wanted to share something. So I won't be able to do loads of information exchange sharing because we're running out of time, but I'll bring in a couple of people just to share that. So Maya.
Hi everyone, yes, I'm still here. Thanks everyone, it's been really, really interesting so far. So I work for the Ahmed Ibaullah Race Relations Centre and Education Trust, and we wanted to share today that we have launched a COVID-19 collecting project. So a lot of you will know us for our work with community organisations and communities on recording their stories and their heritage, but we do from time to time step in where we feel there's a real gap. Obviously we're living in extraordinary times, and as we spent time today talking about, our communities are being impacted harder than ever and in different ways than other people. And unfortunately we're not confident that mainstream archive collecting is going to really record that, especially in kind of full nuanced detail. So we've launched our own COVID-19 collecting. So we're asking people and organisations from Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities across Greater Manchester to help us by submitting materials of all kinds which somehow represent or speak to your experiences of life in lockdown, going forward as we come out of lockdown, and kind of life generally right now. So people tend to think that archives are all about kind of official records and documents, and that's absolutely true. You can submit those kinds of things, but we're also looking for things like you know, creative responses. So if you've been, as a lot of people have, kind of been writing poems or creating bits of artwork, whether you've been cooking frantically, trying new recipes, we're really keen to hear about that. We are keen to take on people's diaries and journals if you feel like sharing that with us. And we also take on digital materials, and a lot of the stuff that we collect these days is now digital. So not just bits of paper, but things like tweets, blogs, email debates, and that kind of thing. We want it to be truly representative, so we're happy to take the kind of positive and celebratory stories, and we know that despite how difficult the situation has been and is, there are some amazing stories of resilience and creativity, and we want to capture that. We also want to capture the painful, difficult experiences. And we also know that within BAME communities, our experiences, there'll be some really strong commonalities, but there are also huge differences in experiences. So it's really important to us to make sure that we get the message out as widely as possible. We will be working on producing some materials in different community languages that you can share more widely, because we are determined to make it as accessible and inclusive as possible. Our resources are a little bit limited. We're trying to bring in funding to pay for translation services and so on, so we don't fall into that trap of asking people to do translation for free. I've put a link, and I think Safina has also put a link to our webpage with the kind of main source of information, but we will be pushing out lots of different messaging on social media and through our website, and Ati, if it's okay, you know, through you guys as well. Yeah. I know time's really tight, so happy to, I'll put my email address in the chat if people want to email directly with any questions or comments. So
Brilliant.
thanks everyone for your time.
Thank you, Maya. I think there's going to be loads of stories sent to you.
Hope so.
It would be fantastic. So I think what I'm going to do is bring this to an end in terms of this part of the meeting. Just say thank you to everybody. I don't know whether Alex is still here, but I want to say thank you to Alex because he has worked really hard in the last few days to get to the deadline of the comic relief application on behalf of BAME network. And that went in last night before midnight. So we're hoping, I don't know whether you want to say anything quickly, Alex?
I think it's a very strong application from the network, and the only question to me is whether they're going to want regional bodies to distribute at all, or whether they're going to just look for one national body. But either way, at least we've stuck our heads above the water, and some groups should benefit, I would hope. Yeah, thanks, Satya, and thanks for your help as well. Couldn't have done it without you.
Brill, thank you so much. So, you know, Kunle mentioned that, so I'm delighted to know that there's more money coming into comic relief, because one of our worries was that there's not enough money in there, so I don't know whether we'll be successful. So hopefully that will give us something which we've not had any resources for a long time, give us something to start actually doing a little bit more around all of this agenda and around the network. So I just want to say thank you to everybody. It's been a bit of a mixed meeting in the sense of lots of sadness and news around what's happening around us, but also, you know, uplifting in terms of the recognition and the amazing work that our groups do. And I think that I'm very minded that we should share more of that at all of our events, so that we kind of know what the strengths are and the social capital that there is within our sector. So I'm just going to say thank you to everybody. But for those of you who would like to hear Mark share some of his knowledge around what's available around funding, etc. at the moment, please stay on for another 15 minutes and we will do that. So I'll just bring this to an end and give us maybe a minute's break and then start again with Mark on that. If there's anything that you'd like to share with anybody, please send it to us and we will put it out on the websites and also on the news bulletins that go out regularly. Thank you to GMCVO for putting all of those together for us, so we can share information very quickly. So please keep the flows going. But have a lovely rest of the day and thank you so much for participating. These things don't happen without you. Thank you very much. Owen?
Hello.
Oh, great. Are you okay for 15 minutes? I didn't ask you at all.
No, that's fine. No problem.
Okay. Super. So not super chairing to not finish all of that in time, but I think it was a bit challenging.
Yeah, that's okay. See, it seems to me like, you know, I felt like one of the contestants on Take Me Out, really, where people are putting the lights off, zoom, 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 and everybody's leaving, thinking, crikey, I've not even said anything yet. I put most of it into the chat anyway, so people can take some of that way. That's great. I've only got 5 minutes. If
right, I think we should kick off. You kick off and carry on with this conversation now.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to share my screen. If it's the right one, is it that one? Okay. So I've put these in. I put these into the chat so people who could grab them or could see them if they had to leave early. I suppose there's a couple of key points initially, is that even on this source here, which is Manchester Community Central, on that, even at that source, there's over 100 different funding, different funders and grant makers available across different sections, whether it's the homeless, veterans, young people, old people. So there's way too many for me to go through. So I did choose 6 of the best. And these are the 6 which are local, in the main local to Greater Manchester. And for what I understand, and I've applied to some of them, I've been successful, is relatively straightforward and easy. Now, I say that because I'm a busy man, but I spend time filling it in. So some of the main issues are about capacity. So what I'd want to do, I'll stop sharing that, but what I'd want to do is just to, the people who are still with us, just to launch this quick poll and just to see if you have been successful. You guys have been successful in applying. These are the ones that they apply. These are the 6, whether you've been successful in applying for any of these. I know if you've not applied, then don't fill the form in. But if you have applied and was unsuccessful, that'd be interesting as well. So I'll just give you another 30 seconds for that. Because I will be coming back to you guys to saying, actually, if you've been successful, then good. And how and why do you believe that that's the case? So you've got another 10 seconds on this.
Like a quiz show that you're playing?
Yeah, it's like a quiz. So is that your contribution? Okay, I'll quickly share these results. So there's only, how many? I think there's 4 or 5 people who took part in that one. Interesting that only 3 out of the 5 had applied to one of those funds and was unsuccessful, which maybe sort of draws us some conclusions. Okay, so I'll stop sharing that one. And the second poll, or the last poll I just want to do quickly, is to see where, I suppose from where we're at as a network, is how we can support people going forward. Now, I mentioned that capacity for me is a big issue, and I suppose for a lot of people that will be a big issue. So if you could just quickly do that one, that would be great stuff for us. Okay. All right. Okay. Well, we've got 6 people now. Okay. 7. Oh, if we're going up, people are engaged. Okay, that's great stuff. Ten seconds. Yeah, everybody happy? Everybody done that? Okay, let's share that one. So as we know, so unsurprisingly, it's just that we haven't got time for, for a myriad of reasons, home life, personal life, work, extra demands. So we know that actually sitting down and completing a form is a nightmare, and we struggle, and it's difficult. So what I suppose, so some of the circumstances around funding is, how do we get capacity to support you? How do we get capacity initially ourselves, and then how does the network have, seek to resource and have capacity to help organisations access the funding which is out there? So that's a challenge for us. And as Kunle and Ati alluded to, the funding which is coming via National Emergency Trust alongside the Combat Relief funding, is about how infrastructure organisations and support organisations are able to support other organisations to access even some of the smaller funds, some of the £500 funds. And so I know that myself, Ati, and others are constantly sort of badgering and asking and requesting, and in some cases demanding, that organisations and funders are look towards how BAME organisations access their support, because it's out there. It's just that, you know, and we know through evidence and surveys that BAME organisations have not got that capacity to be able to do that, and so we're working hard for that to happen. I'll leave it there. If you have any questions, please feel free. There's only 14 of us now, so if you have any questions, come back to me, put it in the chat, and we can pick it up afterwards. If you need any help, I've been successful in 2 applications. If you need any help, please do. If you've been successful and you want to share some of your application, because sometimes it's difficult to understand how much detail that people require, how little detail people require. So sometimes even just thinking about, well, I need to fill in an application form, it's going to take me 2 days, I need to write a dissertation, when actually all they need is a paragraph. So sometimes it's as easy as that, really. But unless you know, you know. And if you don't know, you don't know. And so therefore you put it off, and what could be relatively straightforward applications and opportunities are missed. That's me, Atia.
Sorry, Mark, were you waiting for me to come in?
Yeah, but
my system's gone rubbish. Syra.
Yeah, hi Mark, thanks for that. I just wanted to feed into you, I don't know if it'll be helpful, but I've been really thinking about this whole issue myself with regards to why don't we get round to filling in forms? Why don't we do it? I don't know if it'll be helpful, but I've come to the conclusion that if you look at the way we have to, well, I'm talking very personally, myself, okay? I live my life culturally navigating 2 different lifestyles, 2 different modes of thinking, and 2 languages, at least 3 most of the time, all of the time. And I was thinking about this very much when I was interpreting that when you're doing that, I was doing some interpreting for some legal sort of interpreting, and it is relentless because the lawyer, the solicitor has a break when they speak, the client has a break when they sleep, but there's me in the middle who is bouncing relentlessly between the 2, constantly speaking and interpreting, and my mind is working constantly. And it just drew me to the conclusion that that's what we do in most of our walks of life. What I do anyway, culturally and linguistically, socially, professionally. It's not surprising that you'd burn out, you'd get tired. It's not surprising. So there's something in that, because I work very much in the grassroots community, very hands-on at grassroots level. I'm not going to get to that stage very often. I've got the ability, I've got the competence, I've got the knowledge, I've got the awareness. I just don't have that capacity because of what my grassroots connections would suffer if I spent so much time doing this work. So I don't know whether that's a comment or a question. It's just something that I wanted to share because it's been on my mind for a while as to why can't a lot of people move up the ladder or get funding or get help. It's because of that and capacity, like you said at the start, Mark. It's a huge, issue for us.
And at the I would like just to add to that, and I totally agree. And at the moment, there's so much. If you're in the loop, there is just so much information, and every organizer, the world is rife for actually trying to send you information from everybody, banks, everybody's sending information around COVID and what they're doing to support you as an individual or us as communities. And it's even for me, it's just overwhelming at times, just overwhelming. And I've missed emails, and then people then email me saying you've not responded. I'm like, crikey. And so it is difficult, first of all, to keep track of what's coming in, and secondly, if you need support, to try and navigate through the myriad and the morass in some cases of well-intentioned and good information which out there to say, actually, that's the fun for me, and that's what I should be spending the limited capacity I have myself to go for it. And it's difficult, and I suppose we have to make choices, don't we? And even that sometimes is difficult.
Can I contribute to that? Because I think it's an excellent point you've made, Syra, and it's a real point that has a massive impact on small organizations that are very voluntary led and who need resources. And sometimes they don't need huge amounts of resources. They need small amounts of resources to just keep going because that's all they want. They just want to do their stuff. Okay. And I think that one of the things that I think we should think about in terms of solutions together is what type of support do we need? So really you need a collaboration where, for example, we have 10 organizations collaborating, one of which takes the lead of just putting applications in for everybody and has the expertise to do that. And the rest don't have to worry, they just do their business. Exactly. I come across these organizations, like last week, Davine will know this, Zimbabwean Women's Organization, really kind of trying to support their communities. They haven't got the time, they haven't even got the technology and the know-how. So, it would have been much easier for me and Davine to just sit and fill their form in and do it. And actually, we've been resisting that, saying, oh, people need to be empowered and they need to. Actually, it's all crap. People are more than capable and have got the capability and capacity. But why should they be wasting their time on that bureaucracy? So I think there needs to be a system within our community, in our sector, where we are set up with an engine that does all of that and feeds the rest, and the people do their wonderful work that they are going to do. Now, when we've put the application in with Comic Relief, Alex and I, that's what we've aimed it at. Groups that are below the 10K radar, and that it is about grant giving and letting them do their work. And that's what people need in the system.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was trying to get at, because it's the people who are doing this work, the voluntary people, the boots on the ground who are doing the work, are doing it because they came into it as volunteers and they've stayed in it as volunteers. They're not there to make a fortune. They're not there for the money. They want to survive. They have a right to have enough to live a decent lifestyle with, but it's not about the money for them. And the country as a whole, it would crumble if it wasn't for the voluntary sector input. So that's where I'm saying, and when I talk about my personal experience, that linguistically and culturally as well, I don't have the culture of meeting people in bars or whatever, which I'm not criticizing, but everybody's got their right to live the way they do. And I don't make those connections, a lot of connections, and staying in the loop is so important for this sort of thing. And not only that, it then also resonates with those small groups who are working tirelessly without need of recognition, and apologize for my remark now, and that they don't really care about an accommodation from the Queen. I'm sorry, I'm being honest.
No, that is absolutely true.
Yeah,
I mean,
we're just doing it because we
yesterday that said that to me.
Sorry?
I was talking to a group that's well known for the very, very significant things that they do in the city, but they don't want recognition.
No, exactly. And you know me, Attia, you know my personal feelings about this sort of things, that the people are there to do the job of catching people who are falling through the net. Yeah, that's all we want to do because it's needed. We're there. We are reactionaries. We see something that is needed and we try and plug that hole. That's what we do.
It is about understanding our communities and the faith sector. So, you know, when I talk about the groups who talk to me about not recognition is, you know, they're very much in the faith sector. They have been doing this because of their faith. They know their recognition comes from elsewhere, it's not from here. So, you know, that's the other side of understanding who you're working with.
I wouldn't say it's entirely the faith sector. I think there's a lot of altruistic people out there who don't, but I agree with you there. I'm just saying that it is so exhausting when you are doing everything in two languages and two cultures and negotiating constantly. You're constantly navigating society as well as your society, your culture, your taboos from where your roots hail from, and also the whole issues in the outside world. So anyway, I'll shut up.
Has Mark had to go?
Mark's done a runner.
I don't know whether he's had to go, but or some things.
He said he had to go and do another application.
Okay, I think that helpful to everybody anyway, to just have that communication a little bit. Do you want more? Do you think you want more webinars around funding then? Davine?
Mark has asked the question, does he need to complete an application for the Manchester Council Discretionary Fund grant?
Yeah.
So.
Oh yes, I remember. Yeah. Okay, anyway, I think it's probably been a useful morning and a very tiring one, I think, by now, 2.5 hours yapping. So we'll bring this to an end. And if anybody wants to ask anything or needs help, you know, by all means, come back to us and we will do whatever we can. So thank you very much. Have a lovely rest of your afternoon. And see you next time.
More Zooming. All power to Zooming to all. See you. Goodbye.
Bye.
Owen, just stay on for a minute at the end.
No problem, no problem.
The leave button's just at the bottom of your screen, Mark, on the right-hand side. Henor, are you still there? I don't know anyway. I thought that went well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so kind of no hiccups and flowed fine and all the rest of it. Obviously challenging with the timetable as always. I mean, that happens to us even if we're live in